my overarching vision for Wichita is that I would say that we believe in ourselves and we're able to dream big instead of dream. I want us to dream big and not dream conservatively.
Right. Welcome, everybody. This is the Wichita Live Podcast. I am Landon Huslick, host of the Wichita Live Podcast and curator of the Wichita Live ICT Instagram. Our guest today is Jacob Wayman. Jacob grew up in the Wichita area, and after moving away for a bit, he brought back an even stronger entrepreneurial passion for Wichita and its community. He sees where gaps need filled and then finds ways to fill them. We discuss many of the different communities he is involved with in Wichita and go over some of the details on how he gets so much done. Enjoy my conversation with Jacob Wayman. All right, I'm here with Jacob Wayman. So, Jacob, how's it going, man?
It's going good. I'm having some breakfast right now.
Yeah. We're here at Panera in Wichita. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, born and raised actually in Derby, Kansas. Spent most of my life here. I went to Wichita State for my undergrad and decided to trek up to Kansas City, and I went to graduate school up there and spent about 6 years. For those who don't know, I actually used to be a hospital administrator. So went to school to get all the initials you need behind your name to be a hospital administrator, because for some reason all these doctors have this godlike mentality and want everybody having millions of initials behind their name. But spent about probably 3 years in hospital administration and realized that very quickly I couldn't be stuck between the four walls of a hospital. Mm-hmm. And spent some time there and then got into some sales. And after 6 years up there, I decided that it was time to get back to Wichita, just be around closer to family.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Cool. And so a lot of hospital type stuff. What got you into like the entrepreneur game?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Okay. So my dad's been an entrepreneur since he was 18 years old. He started out as a mechanic, had his own mechanic shop for a number of years, and got into the car wash industry. And it's in my blood. I mean, even my grandfather, who passed away about probably a month and a half ago, he was an entrepreneur. He was in commercial real estate and residential real estate, had a lot of that, and it's just always been ingrained in us. And my oldest brother recently just jumped into a franchise with my dad, nice. And that was about 2.5 years ago. So it's just in our family.
Is that back home in Derby?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually here in Wichita. And so their cool story behind that is my dad was in the car wash industry, and then 2008 hit and did a number on his business, and so he decided, he was like, so he shut down the business and then went to go work for somebody else. Did that for a few years and was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't work for somebody else. And so he was 55 at the time, and so I started just doing some research for him. And then my oldest brother is a journeyman electrician, and he was wanting to kind of do his own thing. He'd reached the top of his career. I mean, he was a journeyman electrician, general foreman for this electrical contractor, and the highest he could go without owning the company. And the guy who owned the company was like, no, I'm going to give it to my son. So gave them did some research for him, and brought 3 franchise concepts to him, and they decided to go with one of them. Nice. And they've been doing really, really well since then.
Very cool. So just kind of scrubbing your LinkedIn. We met at one of the first was Disrupt ICT, and now Shift ICT. We met at one of those. But so scrubbing your LinkedIn a little bit. So there's a lot of different stuff here in Wichita you've worked on. Just kind of stepping through some of it. 1 Million Cups, you helped organize that here?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What's that for people that don't know?
So 1 Million Cups is for your startup entrepreneur to have a stage to share what their company's about. Basically, it's a not I'm going to say pitch competition, but it gives them the opportunity to get in front of people and tell people about their organization or their idea or their company in 6 minutes. And then they solicit feedback from the crowd for about 15 minutes after that.
Nice.
So 1 Million Cups isn't unique to Wichita. It was actually started in Kansas City by the Koch Foundation.
Oh, cool.
And so I had attended it quite a bit when I was in Kansas City. And so when I moved back to Wichita, I was like, man, we need to have this here. And so I heard there was a group of people that were trying to launch it as well. And so I just walked into a meeting, and that's kind of how I got started within doing a lot of things in Wichita. I just started showing up to meetings, kind of not unannounced, but not necessarily fully invited.
Right.
I just heard about them, and so I found my way going to those meetings and stepped in and became one of the organizers of 1 Million Cups Wichita, and we launched it back in January of 2016, I think, is when we started, when we launched it, and it's still running strong. They have weekly meetings. It's weekly every Wednesday morning. They recently just moved over to the library.
Oh, nice.
So for those that want to go check it out, it's Wednesday morning at 9. Great networking opportunity. We have a new organizing group that's there, so I'm not the one leading it anymore. It's a whole new group, and that's kind of the idea with Women in Cups is new groups organize it.
Right.
Yeah.
You attend weekly still, or just when you can?
Just when I can. When I can. I mean, it's one thing is, if you are an entrepreneur listening to this podcast, I encourage you to go pitch. They're always looking for people to present, and that's really what makes that organization great, is the quality of speakers that we have up on stage.
That's awesome. What stage of entrepreneurs are, like, everything from idea to...
we've had anything from idea to product to people that have been very successful and sharing their product and maybe different iterations of what they've done differently for their business.
Nice. Yeah. One of the next ones was the E2E Accelerator.
Yeah. So the E2E actually I got involved with the E2E because of 1 Million Cups. So during 1 Million Cups, I was actually brokering health insurance. So I was selling group health insurance to large employers in Wichita and the surrounding areas, and in everybody's mind, when they saw I was doing 1 Million Cups, they thought, oh, well, he's just trying to do this to sell insurance. Everybody thought, like, okay, that's why he's doing this. He just wants to get into the door with people. And that was kind of hard for me, because when I first moved back, I didn't want people to think that I was only doing things because I wanted to sell them something.
Right.
We're always trying to sell ourselves to people. And, that was frustrating to me, because I had to show that I was authentic, I was genuine, and I had to show them, like, hey, I'm doing this because I care about it, not because I have an ulterior motive. But anyway, so 1 Million Cups, we had a lot of success with that. We had average attendance of over 100 people every single week for about 6 months, and then so the folks that started the E2E, it was some local business leaders had launched it, and they were looking for somebody to run the accelerator portion, so actually be kind of the operational side of it. And so they reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in helping us launch this? And at the time, I was growing a book of business and insurance, and I was doing decently well, and I said, okay, this is an opportunity for me to take a pause on growing a book of business and try to grow the community. Sure. And so I spent probably a good 2 months making that decision, and then I decided to go join the E2E in May of 2016.
Okay. And then as part of that was launch prep with Wichita State, and is that under E2E?
It was under E2E. So when I was at E2E, I was tasked with starting the first Business Accelerator in Wichita. They gave me a blank piece. When I walked in, they said, here's a blank piece of paper, said, figure out what an accelerator is. And so during that time, I tapped into my 1 Million Cups network through all the different communities and said, hey, I'm trying to launch this accelerator in Wichita. Who do I need to talk to? So I spent a good solid, they said we want to launch it in 2 months.
Accelerate the accelerator?
I don't recommend ever doing that. I would say if you're going to launch a business, give yourself between 6 and 8 or even 12 months to get something together. Anyway, so did that. We launched the first accelerator, had 6 companies go through it, and all 6 companies are still in business to this day.
That's awesome.
A few of them that people may know about are like KingFit, Alice Analytics, what was Knox LLCs, what it used to be. True Building's one of them. Buddy Brands used to be called Buddy Rest. He changed his name to kind of facilitate his entire branding. Those are just a few that we've worked with during that time. And so when we were going through that, I learned quickly that there was some missing pieces in the community. So Wichita State does a great job of helping students, people facilitate business ideas. They incubate the idea. So it's like, hey, you got an idea, let's try to figure it out. And then E2E was trying to serve the purpose of trying to accelerate the idea. There was nobody in between to kind of really help foster the idea a little bit more and get it through that early stage of like, do I have a customer? Do I have a market? Do I have these things? And so, launch prep is kind of this in between. And so as a way to bring both Wichita State and the E2E into one place, because really this community has a lot of silos. You have Wichita State doing their thing. You have the city of Wichita doing their thing. You have the Chamber of Commerce doing their thing. You have E2E, for an example, doing their thing. You have all these people doing different things. And so we're trying to bridge the gap between all of them. And so launch prep was a way to bring Wichita State in, bring mentorship in, and we were very selective with our mentors. During E2E, it was like, hey, anybody wants to be a mentor, you can be a mentor. With launch prep, it was personal invites. We found a good 12 different mentors that we knew could do a great job, and the mentors were successful entrepreneurs from the community. Reached out to them, and they said, yeah, absolutely, well, I'd be on board with that. And so that really facilitated some good interactions. And of the 15 companies that went through launch prep, I want to say almost all of them are still in business right
That's
now
awesome.
too, which is great. And a lot of them have built great relationships with their mentors. A lot of them have friendships between each other. I mean, it's just really cool to go to different events like 1 Million Cups or Startup Grind and to see them in the community, and then, and just interacting with people. And then I see the mentors in there as well, and they're having fun together. I mean, it's just a cool ecosystem that we've built
really cool,
so far. Yeah.
Just keeps feeding. Were there any characteristics that were pretty common throughout some of those successful? I mean, it sounds like most of the companies were pretty successful out of those programs. But
yeah, it's what I've seen is just the willingness to keep going. Is this the drive? Because being a startup company in Wichita is hard. Because a lot of times the community doesn't want to take startups seriously. They want to pat them on the head and say good job,
Right.
like go you, but not necessarily like really saying, what do you need? Like, what can I help you with? And it's not necessarily giving them funding, but it's like, what do you need? And it could be they just need a customer.
Right.
And or they need somebody just to introduce them to somebody in their network. And I think that's one thing is what I found with them is just their willingness to not give up. I mean, that's what I've really found. And their willingness to learn is the biggest thing. A lot of them when people would talk about them, they'd absorb it and they would apply it.
Cool. Awesome. So how does Startup Grind differ from these 1 Million Cups and E2E?
So 1 Million Cups is for startup entrepreneurs. So it's a startup company to be able to pitch their business. Startup Grind is the complete opposite to where we want to highlight a successful entrepreneur from the community.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, for example, we had Scott Redler, one of the founders of Freddy's Frozen Custard, on our stage. We've had Jeff Turner, who was the former CEO of Spirit Aerosystems, and so they have a story to tell. So people like the Startup Grind, people think that everybody's an overnight success,
right?
But in the Startup Grind story is about what was the grind for them to get there, what helped them get to that point, and so Startup Grind really reverses it. So 1 Million Cups, we do in the morning over coffee, and then at Startup Grind we do in the evening over drinks, and so it's more of a let your hair down, network a little bit, and it's and Startup Grind brings in a whole different crowd than 1 Million Cups does. So 1 Million Cups is your startup companies, your service providers like your bankers, your lawyers, your accountants, they show up here. Startup Grind's everybody from the community. Everybody from your top business leaders to your startup companies, and everybody in between comes to it. And so, Startup Grind, that's not unique to Wichita. That was started out in San Francisco, and they have over 450 communities in like 150 countries now that run Startup Grind. So, if you're traveling and you want to check it out, so if you're in Dallas, just
see what they're up to.
Startup Grind Dallas, Startup Grind Atlanta, Startup Grind wherever. And that's what. And so Startup Grind, I was in Dallas actually, so I stumbled across it. So I was down there visiting their entrepreneur center. It's called the Dallas Entrepreneurial Center at the Deck, and they host Startup Grind there. And I saw their logo, and I'm like, what is that? And so they kind of told me a little about it. And so just did some research on it and learned that, hey, all it is just it's a license. And, you have to apply for the license. It's like a franchise a little bit.
Sure.
And so I serve as the chapter director for Startup Grind Wichita. And we launched that in January of 2017, and that's been awesome. And we have tons of attendance. People come every single month on a recurring basis, and we get new people every month, and just depends on who we have on stage. And it's cool because you can because we've been able to use that stage to highlight entrepreneurs that people probably wouldn't have heard of before. And then we've also been able to interact with a lot of different groups outside of just our entrepreneurs. We've been able to connect a lot of different pieces of the puzzle.
That's awesome.
So it's been great. It's starting to gain a lot more momentum. It feels like we're going to be hosting Chase Koch actually in November. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually really nervous about having Chase Koch on stage, but I'm excited about it because I think it goes to show that we're getting the attention of folks like Chase who want to be involved, and I think it's a changing of the tide really in the community because it shows that he wants to come and say something, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think that's probably part of their disruptive technology thing too. Make Wichita kind of a hub and start growing that. So you're currently involved with Startup Grind, but you're not involved day to day anymore with 1 Million Cups.
No. Yeah. So 1 Million Cups, I'm no longer an organizer. Startup Grind, still running that as a chapter director, and so that's Startup Grind's one of my side hustles that I do.
That's awesome.
Startup Grind, it's people think that's like my full time job, and I'm like, no. It's a thing that I do. It's a passion project for me. I'm not going to do it forever. I actually kind of in the back of my mind what I'd like to see. So Startup Grind recently launched these new types of chapters, and one of them is called Startup Grind U. and so Wichita State's actually launching their chapter.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so we'll be introducing the chapter director for Startup Grind Wichita State here in November, and the idea of that is to really bring Startup Grind down to Wichita State students, because Wichita State students can't afford the $10, $15 ticket to Startup Grind, so we're bringing the same concept to them but for free.
Nice. Okay.
And so it's going to be held on campus. It's going to be for them, and it's going to be and my idea with that is hopefully that brings a succession plan for what Startup Grind is, because I can't run it forever. I don't want to run it forever.
Right.
But it's for right now. I'm trying to continue to help it grow and gain the momentum that it needs.
Cool. And I mean, that's with the innovation campus and everything they're doing at Wichita State. I mean, it fits right in. So
yeah. Well, and also with Startup Grind, I mean, a lot of things I have my name attached to, but it's not just me. I mean, It's an entire community behind us that continue to help us every single day. I mean, Startup Grind wouldn't be successful without the community.
Right.
Women Cups wouldn't be successful without the community. E2E wouldn't be successful without the community, and I wouldn't be successful without the community. I mean, that's the thing. It's like everything is. I'd have to stop sometimes and look back and say, okay, how did I get here? And then and I can always point to probably a good 3 or 4 people, or even more than that have given me that opportunity to do what I was doing. I wouldn't have been able to be here if they didn't stop and say, hey, we'd like to have you do something. I recently read this book, actually rereading it right now. It's called 7 Decisions by Andy Andrews, and it's all about the 7 decisions people make in their life. And I think it was this book. I may be wrong with it, but I was listening to a few of them recently, and what they were saying was, he was talking about he won the Nobel Prize for, it was in like solving world hunger, or not solving world hunger, but solving a piece of it. And it went back to like, okay, well, really, who was the reason why he's there? Because his mentor was George Washington Carver. Okay, so is that the person we need to celebrate? And they're like, no, because George Washington Carver was adopted by so-and-so.
Yep.
Okay, so was it that person? They said, no, well, maybe just kind of you go back
trickle
like
down,
this, trickles down, and you try to figure out where's the core of all of it. And so, it's one that's kind of gotten me, because I'll be honest, I think people, and me personally, this is me being more vulnerable about it, but I've gotten prideful before, and a little bit more or less arrogant on some things, and I need some reality checks sometimes, and I've had a few of them recently.
Sure. Let's see here. So one of the next things you're involved with is Connecting ICT.
Yeah.
What's that?
So Connecting ICT is so if you look at the city of Wichita, there's a big gap between the experienced business leaders of the community, who are kind of the leaders of Wichita, and then you have like your entry-level person that's at Koch or Spirit or something like that. There's really this disconnect between them. So Connecting ICT is really catering towards that 30 to, I would say, 45, 50-year-old in the workforce, because you have Young Professionals of Wichita, which is a great organization in town, really caters to that 20 to 30-year-old, the ones who are in college, and Connecting ICT fills that gap that's next, because there's really when people more or less graduate from YPW, where do you go? Unless you're fortunate enough to get on a board of directors for a nonprofit, then you're there. But there's really no place for you to still connect with other people, because you don't necessarily want to go at 35 years old. You don't want to go to a YPW event,
right?
And so Connecting an ICT is really it's a hub to connect people to resources in the community, whether that be through civic, whether it be through nonprofit, whether it be through private industry, or it could be even personal too as well. Okay. And so with Connecting ICT, it's a group of me and about probably 5 or 6 other folks that run it together, and then it was formed out of the Emerging Leaders Program at the Business Journal, and I knew some of the folks that were getting it started, and they reached out to me and said, hey, we'd really like you to be involved with it. And so what we do is we facilitate monthly happy hours that have some sort of a discussion format in it. And so next week on October 25th, I'm not sure when you're going to air this, but on October 25th, we're going to have it's going to be called the Developing the Future of Wichita. Okay. And so we're going to have folks from people that are in the 30 to 50-year-old range that are going to be on stage. They're going to share a little bit about what they're doing in the community. So we're having Ben Hutton with Hutton Construction, Nick Esterline from TGC Group. We're going to have Ebony Clemens Jubilate. She's from Westar Energy. I mean,
Very cool.
Mary Beth Jarvis. I mean, people who are really doing things within certain areas of the community, and so it's going to be talking about that. So that's what Connect and ICT is
Nice.
to really connect 30 to 50-year-olds in the community to more or less retain them in the city. So they don't realize, well, I know nothing, which doesn't offer me anything, and so they move on.
Man, yeah, people say there's nothing to do in Wichita or don't get involved, but there's all these different opportunities to...
Absolutely.
So the next one was the Shift ICT, or formerly Disrupt ICT.
Yeah. So so Shift ICT, formerly Disrupt ICT. So the folks that have founded that is myself, Jason Taves, who's the VP of Technology for Alice Analytics, and then Dave Cunningham, who's the founder and CEO of Flint Hills Group.
Okay.
And so Flint Hills Group, they are a custom software company, and then Alice is a AI technology for the HR industry that they're building right now. So, very two awesome organizations. And so Jason and Dave went to a conference in Kansas City in the fall of 2017, and they went to this. It was a blockchain technology thing, and they said, "Man, why are we not doing this in Wichita? Why do we not have some very industry-specific conferences in Wichita?" So they came back, and I think I was at One Million Cup standing next to Jason, and he was talking about it, and I said, "Well, why not do it? Let's just do it. Let's just host something in Wichita. Why not go about doing it?" And so he said, "Well, let me get Dave together." And so we all got together and said, "All right, let's launch this thing." And so we started meeting quite often, and we formed Disrupt ICT, and we had our first event in April of 2018, and it was on blockchain technology. Very, very specific, very focused, and I think about probably 10% of the people there knew what blockchain was, and then the other 90% were just wanting to be there just to be there.
Right.
And it was good. I mean, it was talking about something that hasn't been talked about in the community. I think it got people thinking about what more we can do in this community. And then we decided to change the name to Shift, and the reason why we were going to change the name is because TechCrunch has their Disrupt conferences, and we knew about it already.
Yeah.
We just were kind of shot from the hip and just kind of got something done. And we didn't really want to get a cease and desist letter from TechCrunch, 10 months, 11 months down the road. If we bring a speaker in that gets some attention, even regionally, we don't want them to see it and then something happened to it. But so it became when we were thinking about what the name change was, James Chung had his final presentation in June, or one of his last ones he's done in Wichita, and it really showed that Wichita's still falling behind. We were still being outpaced by our peer cities. Some crazy statistics that came out of that thing that just kind of hit me in the face was, we per capita income basis, we pay our employees are paid $10,000 less than our peer cities. Des Moines, Iowa has experienced 50% GDP growth since 2005 or 6. I mean, just crazy numbers. And then our economy's regressed 1% in the past year. So. Or since 2010, whatever it was. But it's the point was we need to really do something different, and I was tired of hearing about these peer cities from other people. Quit telling me about it. I want to hear it from the horse's mouth. And so, when we looked at that and we said, okay, what are we really trying to do? And with Disrupt ICT, and we're trying to shift mindsets, shift perspectives, shift people's thinking. And so that's where Shift ICT came into play. And so we did a Shift ICT summit in September of this year, and we brought in, it was 12 speakers from 9 different cities throughout the Midwest, and they were our peer cities. And so that was a ton of fun, ton of work, but it was more or less, I'm saying it wasn't transformational, at least not yet. But it was a good opportunity to hear from these cities and hear what they're doing that's different. And each one of them had a different perspective because they each represented something different in their community. But it went to show that, okay, Wichita has the pieces of the puzzle. We do. We have all the pieces of the puzzle to really move forward, but how do you put them together? And I think that's really what highlighted people. And so, post-Shift ICT, we've actually seen a lot of people say, okay, you're continuing to tell me what we need to do. Tell me how we need to do it. So kind of shift that a little bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people suffer from analysis paralysis. Yeah. They think about it too much. They want to start something, or they have some small idea, but they don't know what the first step or the next step is. And
that's the thing is, I'll be honest, for me, all the things that I've launched have not been brand new ideas. Startup Brand's not a brand new idea. One Man Cups isn't a brand new idea. it was looking at what another community was doing and saying, how do we put Wichita's spin on it? So it's not recreating the wheel, it's how do you put Wichita's spin on it?
Right.
And I think those are people, they don't realize that, and I think that's what I wanted Shift to become, was look at what's happening in other communities and how do we bring pieces of Omaha, Tulsa, Des Moines, Oklahoma City, how do we bring pieces of all these puzzles and put them together? How do we do that? And so, that's really what I want people to encourage, because people, it seems like in Wichita, people feel like, well, we're in Wichita. Like, they put us in they put themselves in a box, and they don't really want to look outside of there. So, like when people travel, I want them to travel with intentionality. Like, travel with intention. Go to another city and really look at that city and what makes it thrive. What makes you love that city when you go travel there, and come back to Wichita and say, hey, how can we possibly do that here?
For sure, definitely. Was the second Shift ICT, was that blockchain centric, or was that just anything, just to kind of shift the mindset? The September one.
September 1, it wasn't blockchain specific.
Wasn't blockchain specific.
No, it was more, I would say, more community development.
Sure.
Even though we had portions of tech in there.
Right.
We had Ryan Weber, who is the president of the KC Tech Council. He was speaking. And so it was a little bit more broader, and I think, and so what we're with Shift, where it's going to go in the future is we're probably going to do more in the springtime. It's going to be more workshop related, and maybe focus back in on technology, and in the fall time frame do more of a summit to where we make it a lot much broader.
Very cool. So from the blockchain one, the first one, were you pretty familiar with blockchain before that, or?
No, not at all. For me, I knew what it was. I knew what cryptocurrency was.
Right.
I knew of it, but Dave and Jason are the experts on the tech side. For me, that's why we all work really, really well together, and that's one thing that I always encourage people to do, is find a good team behind you to work together who kind of have their expertise, because they were the experts in the technology. And so they were able to find the speakers for me. I was the operations side of it. Okay, how do you put all of this together, and how do you format the talks? How do you do logistics? How do you do all the things behind the scenes to make it actually be delivered? And so, so for me personally, I'm not familiar with it, but I know it's something that Wichita needs to pay attention to, because another big reason why we decided to launch Disrupt Now Shift was, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with Steve Case's book, The Third Wave.
Yep.
So the Third Wave it screams Wichita, because the Third Wave book is the first wave is the development of the internet. So the first wave is your AOLs, your just the internet in general. That's the first wave. Second wave is Google, Facebook, everything in that area. The third wave of technology is technologies that aren't necessarily sexy but lucrative.
Yep.
And they solve problems. And so I think that's where I look at Wichita is, we're not necessarily a sexy city, but we can build probably really good technology that's very lucrative. I look at NIAR at Wichita State, and people don't realize everything that they actually do there.
Yep.
And they're creating some crazy technology that's solving world problems. And so, that's where I think with blockchain, we can look at, okay, how can we solve problems with blockchain technology, and how can we do things differently? And so the whole idea is just introducing the community to concepts that are out that can help them change their mindset.
Especially if only 10% of the people in the room knew what it was beforehand. Yeah. So this is kind of all the stuff you've been working on, what I think is outside of your day job.
Yeah.
You actually work at Cornejo and Sons?
Yes, I do. One thing is I don't have a family. I don't have any kids, wife, or anything. So I will say I have the ability to be involved, be active, and that's one thing that I will say I encourage a lot of people to do. If you have the time, don't waste it. I think so many people say, well, I'm going to wait till I'm older to do something. But I'm like, if you have the time, get involved now to do something. If you see something you want to solve it. But so at Cornejo Construction, Cornejo and Sons, I'm their business development director, and what I do for them is just really look at all their business lines and try to figure out what's a new strategy for them to grow business. So Cornejo and Sons is a very large company in town. They are a materials provider, so sand, rock, ready mix concrete, asphalt, and then they also do installs. They're a vertically integrated company. And so, my idea has just been working with each one of the business units, try to figure out how do we become the go-to resource for education when it comes to pavement design, pavement materials. And so I've been doing that for about 9 months now. I will say my boss, George, allows me the opportunity to do a lot of these other things too.
That's awesome.
But for the most part, I spend a lot of my hours outside of my 8 to 5 working on these other initiatives.
Very cool. And then the other thing was the Wayman Consulting Group. Is that just you or family or?
So Wayman Consulting Group is me, and that's what Shift runs underneath.
Okay.
Startup Grind runs underneath. I do a little bit of side consulting for companies, but mostly it's kind of the shell that runs Disrupt and Startup Grind and those. I mean Shift and Startup Grind.
Right.
Those. Yep.
Very cool. All right. So next up, do you have an ultimate vision for Wichita? Like, do you have a perfect Wichita that you see that you're trying to attain, or is there just a couple things you're kind of going in a certain direction?
You know, when I say I don't necessarily think there's a perfect vision for Wichita. I mean, I think there's some big dreams that I'd like to see happen. I think a lot of people would. You know, one would be I would like to see our MSA grow to 1 million people. I mean, I would like to see us go from 650,000 to 1 million people. A lot of people disagree with me on that, but I feel like when you get that many people, a lot more things can happen. I also feel like I'd like to see us become the air capital of blank. You know, not the air capital, not
the blank capital,
the blank capital of the world. I said that backwards, but you know, I'm because we really aren't the aviation capital. I would say like maybe we can be the blank aviation, the aviation whatever technology of the world. Yeah. Like, because I think what I'd like to see Wichita do is, I think we're good. We're an inch deep and a mile wide in a lot of things, but not an inch wide and a mile deep in certain things.
Right.
And I think I would like us to see we leverage more of the folks that are in town already. So like with Koch, for an example, what is Koch doing that we need to double down on, and how do we truly collaborate with Koch? Because I think there's this big disconnect between the city of Wichita and Koch Industries.
Right.
I look at like Bentonville, Arkansas, and what Walmart's done down there. So Walmart made a commitment to the Bentonville area that they will have every one of their suppliers of Walmart will have a physical presence in the Bentonville area. That place has blown up. I've grew up going to Beaver Lake down there, and from Rogers, Arkansas, used to be a 20,000 population. It's now over 100,000 people, and because of that. And so, I think, and I know it's kind of my overarching vision for Wichita is that I would say that we believe in ourselves, and we're able to dream big instead of dream. I want us to dream big and not dream conservatively.
Right. I think part of that is like a lot of the college grads from around here, either if they went to college here or just from Wichita in general, like they're going elsewhere for certain things. Like there's not like I have a buddy that went out to like San Francisco, and so it's like, okay, he went out there for tech and that type of stuff. It's like Wichita needs whatever that is here to keep people around. Because we're losing a lot of good talent. I mean, the Chung Report's mentioned it a few times.
Oh,
how we're losing a lot of big talent.
And I think it's we don't have a stickiness factor in this community, and we don't recycle our talent very well. So say somebody's working at Koch or Cargo, for example. Most millennials are only staying in organizations 2 to 5 years. People are like upset about that. I'm like, no, that's awesome, because that's diversity. Because you're going to get somebody who's got experience in this industry, and they're going to move down the street to this company in a totally different industry. Right. That's diversity. And I think we need to encourage that. But if somebody leaves Koch, they don't walk down the street to go work somewhere else. They move to Dallas or Denver or name a city, and they stay there because they can find another job after their 2 to 5 year stint there. And so we don't have a good way to recycle our talent. So that's difficult. The thing that we face right now.
Right. So I was looking through some of the articles on your LinkedIn, and you wrote a 2016 year in review.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had a 2017 one.
I didn't.
But one quote you had was 2016 taught us is that we can rise, we can win. So now that we're almost to the end of 2018, how do you think that's progressed, or is it still moving in the right direction? Have we slowed down?
Oh, I think we are moving in the right direction. It's slowed down quite a bit. So 2016 was when E2E was launched, Women in Cups was launched, a few other initiatives were launched during that time, and it showed that we could really rise to the challenge. But what happened is not more people didn't get involved. It was. Right. I look back in 2016 and look at who was involved in making progress happen, and it's the same people in 2018.
Right.
And and I think that's where something that we've slowed down a little bit, because I think a lot of people have said either, and this is just my perspective, I think people have felt that, well, they got it, so they're just going to handle it. And a lot of it, I will say, I think I'm a little bit to blame for a lot of it, because I am involved in a lot of things, and I think that holds people back from wanting to get engaged, because like, oh well, Jake got it, got it, or Jake's team's got it, or whatever. And and that's where sometimes I have to self-reflect and wonder, okay, do I need to pull back on a couple different things?
Right. So downtown, it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on with Century 2, the discussion of that, new baseball team, new baseball field, all that kind of stuff. What kind of view do you have? Like, what do you think the right move is for Century 2? And what kind of opinion do you have on like the new baseball team coming and that kind of stuff?
Century 2, give me a sledgehammer. Let's tear that crap down. What
about the skyline?
Tear that crap down. Mine is, it's funny who was I talking to? Scott Schwinneman actually mentioned this. So Scott Schwinneman at Startup Grind mentioned this. He goes, rewind back when Century 2 was getting built, that discussion. So I don't remember what the name of it was, but there was a former whatever it was before Century 2. Same discussion was happening at that time too. No different. He said, because Scott's dad was part of the build of Century 2. And so, he was saying like, everybody was talking about, well, what about this? What about that? And it was same situation, same discussion that they had. And he goes, and so it's no different now. So he goes, why? But he goes, Wichita needs to realize that it's okay to take a chance on something. And I feel like Century 2, we need a new facility. We need one that's more conducive, that really will bring people there. Because I'll go to Century 2 for like the symphony, for an example, but I leave afterwards. I don't want to hang out there because I just don't feel like it's a great place that I want to hang out at. There's really nothing to do around there. And so, we need to figure out a way that keeps people in that area. It accesses the river, just like the baseball stadium. Right now, the discussion is, are we going to move the baseball stadium close to the river? Why is that a discussion? It needs to happen, because if we do that, it's going to change a lot of things. But people are like, well, what about McLean and all these and everything that goes along with that? But I think Century 2 and the baseball stadium are great discussions we're having. But I wonder if we're really looking at what the 5, 10, 15-year vision of those things are. So basically, I agree, we need to do that. So we have that team so they're moving here from New Orleans. What's to stop them to become like the next Wranglers, to where at the very end of it, they're like, oh man, we have no attendance, community's not supporting us, so they move. Like, how do we not let that happen? So what's our 5, 10, 15-year vision for that baseball team in Wichita to help rally around them? And, I think it's a lot to do with how do we support the owners of that organization? Right. How do we make sure that they're getting everything that they need, and how do we work together, and how does the city continue to be a good advocate for them and vice versa? I think truly it's going to be collaboration that's going to prove the success or failure of the baseball stadium and the baseball team, for that matter.
Right. Along similar lines, what if you could do whatever you wanted along the river? What would that look like? Would you? I know like a lot of places like San Antonio and places like that have like really cool Riverwalk, a lot of restaurants, things to do. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it'd be very similar to what they did with Bricktown and what they did with the Waterwalk down in San Antonio. I think it's bringing more resources to there. I'm not saying we have to have like boat rides and those sort of things. I just think something to where I can sit on a patio and look at the river. Right. Or I can, because I think that's one thing we don't have in this community is a lot of good patios to actually enjoy a drink, enjoy some good food, And then I know we're getting better with live music, but I think the way I would access that is, we would have an entire area that's dedicated to restaurants on the river, and then we have an entire area that's dedicated to activities on the river. Yeah, so kind of separated, and it's on both sides of it too. So with like what River Vista did, they're accessing the river by having, canoes or whatever they're having down there. And I think we need more of that. And I think we're hopefully maybe getting there. But ideally I'd love to see a handful of restaurants that are down there and stuff that actually really accesses the river in a good way.
Sure. Let's see. What do you think the competitive advantage of like entrepreneurs or young professionals, even old professionals in Wichita, what do you think our advantage is?
I think we're scrappy. We know how to do a lot with a little. I think as we have there's a couple startups that I know personally that work on a shoestring budget, and they're not having to go. They're raising money, but it's very small money raises, and so they're having to figure out how are they getting by with just a little bit to build these technologies, to build these businesses. I think that's a benefit, but also a hindrance to us as well, because we are scrappy. We feel like we can do it ourselves. We feel like, we don't need anybody else. We can do it ourselves.
Okay. If you could get everybody in Wichita together for an hour, just everybody, not just this core group of people that kind of goes to 1 million cups and start a grind, is there any certain topic you would mention, or just try to get people involved?
Collaboration.
Yeah.
That'd be the overarching goal of the entire conversation, is collaboration. How do you do it, and why do you do it, what makes it successful, and just because I don't think we have that. We have it in certain areas, but not as a community. We do not. We do not have collaboration. There's so much there's so many silos in this community that it just makes me crazy.
Gotcha. So you spend a lot of your time with all this other stuff with Wichita. Is there a point where you're going to want to pursue more of like your ideas or your initiatives?
Absolutely. I very much do. I mean, I would love to see a time where I don't have to do all the things that I'm involved with right now. I would love. I'm excited for that. The time's not now, but absolutely, because and that's one thing I struggle with personally, is a lot of people ask me, well, what do I need help with? Because that's one thing that that we may talk about in a little bit, but that's one thing that I always do when I leave a meeting is, how can I help you? Like, what are 3 things or 3 people, or what can I do to help you make progress on your goals? Right. And when people turn that around on me, I don't have an answer. That's the hardest thing for me, is I don't have an answer, because I feel like I don't know if it's a sense of pride, which it probably is, which is unfortunate, but I need to be more willing to know what my goals are. And so, I mean, I have a vision for where I want to be at, but my struggle is, how do I get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody had an app idea or a business idea, but let's just say it's an app, because I've been there in college, come up with an idea. What would be the first couple steps, or just even the first step? What would you recommend to somebody that sitting in college right now and has a good idea?
I'd say go find 50 customers or potential customers and go interview them. Yeah. Go talk about your idea and see what they say. If they say, "Oh, that's
before
stupid."
you even start.
Before you start, go do customer development. I mean, that's one piece that people think they have a great idea, but do you even know who your customer is? Right. So if you go create this idea and you're like, "Oh, this is the best idea," it could be the best idea ever, but is there anybody out there who's going to even buy it? And so that's where you got to figure out, because I think a lot of people get so focused on, let's build something, and then they forget. They go, "Oh crap, I don't have anybody who's going to buy this." And so I think that'd be the first and foremost, is go figure out, go vet the idea with people. Go talk to people, to talk to as many people as you can. And people get so afraid that, oh, someone's going to steal my idea. No, they're not. Because you came up with the idea, and there's a lot of work that goes in behind making it successful. They're not going to steal it. And people think, maybe someone goes and steals it, but, that means that they have a lot of time on their hands to be able to go do it. So people need to get out of that mode of being fearful of that.
I think, that's huge. I mean, I don't think people realize that execution is the harder part. Like, ideas are a dime a dozen.
What is it, like 10% the idea, 90% the execution, whatever the statistic is, but it's execution's, a majority of it.
Right, for sure. And so we talked about it a little bit off mic, but I was looking over our list of hosts for the Young Life Banquet coming up in November, and you were one of those. So how'd you get involved with Young Life?
Yeah, so I got a Young Life through Jake Ramstack, a good friend of mine here in the community. He was a firm believer in Young Life, was very active when he was at East High, and then was also a coach or whatever they call it for, I think, Wichita East 2 as well during his professional years. And he invited me to Man Camp a couple years ago, and I was not active in Young Life when I was younger because I didn't have it in my high school. And I just, I love the mission of it. They don't, with Young Life, they don't pound faith on people. It's more of like, let's build a relationship, let's build a friendship, and then it's slowly introduced to them. So that's what I love about Young Life. And so, I'm just active in just the sense that I support a couple of the folks that are working for Young Life right now. A couple of my friends work for them, and so that's really how I've gotten active in it.
Very cool. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit. What is something you recommend often to people? Book, podcasts, anything like that?
Yeah, there's 2 books that I consistently go back to. One is called The Go-Giver, and the other one's called The Alchemist. Both
The
are,
Alchemist.
which is funny because I usually am a person who always reads books that are nonfiction, that are real, and both of those are fables.
Yep.
And it's interesting. Those are my two favorite books. I mean, I point to those two things all the time. I mean, I recently reread The Go-Giver, and and it's keeps going back to what are you doing to serve others? What are you doing to serve others?
Yeah.
And then one is it's a text message I get every morning, and it's through Darren Hardy, and it's called Darren Daily. And Darren Hardy used to be the publisher of Success Magazine, and now he's like a success mentor. He's a coach, and so he sends out this text message every morning, and it's 5-10 minutes long as a mentoring session, and it gets you to think a little bit every single morning about certain things that are helping you make progress on your goals.
Very cool. Yeah, I haven't read The Go-Giver. I'll have to check that one out. But I recommend The Alchemist to pretty much anybody.
The Alchemist is funny because I was reading it right before I moved back to Wichita and was a little apprehensive about moving back. And it's all about at the very end of the book, he's back to where the treasure was the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
The entire time.
It's funny. One of my brothers is he's 6 months deep into traveling the world right now.
Oh, wow.
And so he didn't read it till I think right before he left. I've been recommending it for years, and he finally read it. And so I'll call him Santiago from time to time.
That's awesome.
But let's see. Do you have a favorite failure in any aspect of life?
There's a few, actually it's quite a bit, that some that I probably wouldn't disclose because they're it shows a little bit. But one of them is when I was 25, I think, I was selling insurance in Kansas City, and I decided to resign from the job, and I had it in my mind that I was going to get a job immediately. I mean, I'd built a good network in Kansas City. I'm like, it's going to be easy. I'm just going to find a job. I was unemployed for 9 months. And one of the hardest times in my life, because I was by myself in Kansas City, didn't want to tell my parents what had happened, because I made the choice myself to resign because of just certain things were happening in the organization, and it wasn't a very mature thing to do at the time, and it was I thought I had everything in order for me to do it, and that was probably one of the worst decisions that I made.
Right.
I mean, I would have resigned eventually from that organization, but I didn't have a plan. Did not have a plan for me resigning afterwards, and that was probably one of my failures that kind of continues to stick to me every time.
Right.
Yep.
So what lessons did you take away from that then?
Well, I learned a lot from that time period. That's when I truly found personal development. During that 9 months, I got really active in journaling and really putting my thoughts down on paper, and really learning some habits that still stick to me to this day, because I was like, okay, I gotta pick myself up by my bootstraps and try to figure this thing out. I tried to be an entrepreneur in that time, and it failed miserably. I thought, I could be like a consultant or whatever, and it didn't work out. I was 25 years old. I didn't know anything. But yeah, so that during that time was kind of it was a really rough time for me. But lessons I learned from that was, if you're gonna step away from something, have a plan for how you're gonna step away, and do it, and talk to people. Find mentors. Talk to people about it before you do it. Don't just act rationally or irrationally. I should say, act irrationally. Just you need to talk to people.
So journaling, I've been trying to get into it, and I struggle with keeping it consistent sometimes. Do
Yeah.
you have recommendations for people, or what's your process of journaling?
Yeah, so my process for journaling is, one of them is the Darren Daily. So I'll listen to Darren Daily, and that triggers some things to write about. And then I also, so my process for journaling is, I have 3 or 4 questions that I ask myself every morning that I write about, and then and then I always say with journaling is, it depends on the time of my life, but sometimes I've been really, really negative in my journal, and it comes out later on in the day of negativity.
Sure. And
then so I try to be very positive, turn things around. So if there's a bad thing happening, how do I turn it into a positive? So there's a few core questions that I ask myself, and I can hold on one second.
Yeah, no problem.
Actually share them. So questions that I have are, what does God desire of me today? What would make today great? What am I grateful for today? What is one thing I can do to make progress on my goals? And what did I learn yesterday? Nice. So those are things that trigger me to kind of ask questions of myself when I'm journaling, to kind of trigger some thoughts and everything. And then I have a devotional that I do every morning too, that kind of that gives me questions to ask myself too.
Cool.
So I think it's always having certain questions that you continue to ask yourself every day, and that's how you journal. I mean, I've been doing it. I do it 5 days a week. I don't do it all 7, so I give myself some grace on the weekends. But that's one thing that I do is I journal every single morning.
That's awesome. What is your definition of success?
I think my definition of success is if I can see that I've helped somebody make progress on their goals, that's success to me. If I can look and see that I know that I've been able to have a hand in somebody else finding something that's beneficial to them, I say that's success.
Very nice. Do you have a life motto you live by, or what's some of the best advice you've received over the years?
It's not necessarily a life motto, but it's more always be a servant leader. I think that's something that I've had to learn over the years, but it's always have a servant's heart. Always be willing to help people, and it could be as simple as opening the door for somebody, or picking up some trash that's on the ground or something like that. I mean, it's something small like that. But my life motto is always be a person of value. Always be a person of value.
I like it. What's a habit you've developed over the past few years that's most improved your life?
I would say it's the journaling is one of them. And then I also wake up, every morning at 5 a.m. Not on the weekends. I will say everybody thinks like, oh, if you're gonna do it consistently all the time. Like, no, give yourself grace. You need to have that break.
Right.
But so I wake up early 5 days a week because it's getting up before the rest of the world's woken up, and there's something fulfilling about that. And then also exercising. I mean, that's one thing is always like every morning it's always filled with exercising, filling my mind with positive things, and then honestly it's eating a healthy breakfast. I think people underestimate the value of nutritious food and how much it energizes you, and just taking care of your body.
Right.
Unfortunately my family's had a lot of health issues, both sides of the family, heart issues, and so it's something I gotta pay attention to.
Right. What is your favorite part of Wichita, or is there a hidden gem that a lot of people might not know about?
I think that my favorite part is the people. I think we have so many different types of people in this community that I think people undervalue the diversity that we truly have in this community. Not diversity in like race or gender or anything like that, but really focused on the people. The people in this community are amazing.
Yeah. So what does Wichita mean to you?
Wichita's home. Wichita is truly home for me, but what it means to me, it's a place that I've been given opportunity. I've been very blessed in this community to be given the opportunity to, start and run all the things that we talked about throughout this podcast. I mean, I've been so blessed and fortunate through Wichita to say, yeah, here's an opportunity, go after it. And that's what Wichita means to me is it's opportunity.
Awesome. Do you have any final comments or calls to action for Wichita?
I think one thing that I've been talking about here recently with a lot of people is if you see somebody who's on the bench, go get them off the bench. Because I think so many people want to get into the game and they want to be active in the game, they just don't know what to do. And so it's like if you are considered a coach or a person who is active right now, go find that person on the bench and just invite them into something. Ask them to be involved with something, because all people want is somebody to ask them to get involved.
Right.
There's you don't have a lot of people who are going to take action immediately. They're waiting for somebody to say, hey, here's something to go do, and get them involved. And so that's my call to action is who's on the bench and who needs to get in the game.
Cool. Where can people find you? Are you on social media or anything?
Yeah, so very active on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. Not active on Twitter. I don't do a lot on there, or Snapchat. But yeah, so I would say probably professionally LinkedIn. If people want to really connect with me, go check me out on LinkedIn.
Awesome. I will link everything we talked about and your different links and everything like that. But really appreciate you sitting down, and this is fun.
Absolutely, very cool.
Thanks, man. Thank you to everyone who stuck it out and listened to the episode of the Wichita Life podcast. Thanks to the local Wichita band The Caves for use of their song. You can find links to everything we discussed in the show notes at wichitalifeict.com. Hit the subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss any of the interviews we have coming up. If you have any comments or recommendations for our podcast, feel free to contact us at wichitalifeict@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, hasta luego.